Mere days, perhaps hours away from the national championship game, the finale of this first 12-team college football playoff, and what a clash it has provided. Two traditional giants, two teams that don't meet often, and this time for the highest stakes imaginable. Ohio State and Notre Dame. This is the College Game Day podcast. Rece Davis, Pete Thamel together again. Pete, what a season it's been. I think that there were various points in this season where these two teams that will play for the national championship were viewed as done. I mean, after Notre Dame's great win at Texas A&M, they turn around and lose to Northern Illinois. And as Jack Kaiser, the standout Notre Dame linebacker, has said many times, they've been in playoff mode pretty much since then. And here they are in the national championship game. Ohio State lost its two biggest games of the regular season, with all due respect to the game at Penn State, but the game at Oregon and their rivalry game that they talked incessantly about winning and then got spanked again by Michigan seemed done. And instead, from that point forward, Ohio State has looked like the team many of us expected in the preseason. They look to be an unbeatable juggernaut. They look to be a team so full of weapons that you cannot possibly decide which one to slow down without getting destroyed by the other one. And yet, this Notre Dame team has like an edge, a feel, a resiliency to it that makes you feel like that they've got a little bit more than a puncher's chance, that they have an avenue to win their first national championship since 1988.
Yeah, count out Notre Dame at your own peril. I know the odds makers have them at double digits right now, Rece. I know that we can talk about this a little more later, but this playoff's become a war of attrition, and the injuries have not been kind to Notre Dame. Just like if you go through the course of the season, they haven't been kind to Ohio State either, especially on the offensive line. But sitting here today in mid to late January in this new paradigm where we are in, Notre Dame has some juju. They are the hot team in the NCAA basketball tournament, right? They are clicking and they are firing and they are finding ways to win. And I think one thing we've learned about this 12-team playoff is that you have to win games in different ways. And Notre Dame has figured out ways to win games in different ways, whether it's a 98-yard touchdown run from Jeremiah Love, whether it's some special teams voodoo from Marty Biaggi, and whether it's a good old-fashioned wait 59 minutes and 35 seconds for the other team to mess up, which they did. So I just really feel like there's no reason why Notre Dame can't find another way to win.
You know, I was at an event last weekend. We celebrated Lou Holtz's 88th birthday, and of course, he was the head coach for the 1988 national championship team. And there were a ton of guys from that 88 team. There were all guys who played for Lou throughout his tenure at Notre Dame, but there were a lot of guys from the 88 team who were at the party. And the feeling, the energy, the excitement, the feeling, and certainly Notre Dame was a juggernaut that year, and this team wasn't viewed that way over the course of the season. But I think they feel like that this team has that Notre Dame magic. You lose Riley Mills and R.J. Oben, who you thought maybe would step in and do a lot of this over the course of the year. The grad transfer from Duke steps in and has the play of the game against Georgia. You look like you're getting whipped against Penn State, and you just keep hanging in, and Christian Gray makes a play. Mitch Jeter makes a field goal, at the end of the game, and after struggling throughout the course of the season. And there is a real belief, I think, throughout the Notre Dame family, if you will, that that they're going to find a way to win the game, something they haven't done in their last two meetings, because people sort of forget, because these two play so rarely. This is the third straight year that Notre Dame and Ohio State have played. And on both occasions, tight games for the most part. Notre Dame couldn't get much done on offense in Columbus a couple of years ago, but they sort of hung in the game until, Ohio State was able to, I think, win it by 11. Then everyone knows what happened last year in South Bend with the touchdown at the end of the game. Two guys who are no longer with the Ohio State program, the quarterback and running back Chip Trainum and Kyle McCord at quarterback, with the Irish with only 10 defenders on the field. I might suggest to Al Golden that they tried it with 10, and with all of these weapons he'll have to deal with in the championship game on Monday night, that maybe he should try to get away with 12 or 13, maybe 14 if he could.
I'm just disappointed you went to Lou Holtz's birthday party, recounted that, and didn't give us just a taste of your Lou Holtz impression.
Well, I sure wasn't going to do it at one point during the night. There was they said some very nice things in my about me, and which Lou piped up immediately and said, "Clearly, I didn't have any say in that being said." Right there, so it was very funny. I don't do that in front of coach. Sometimes he doesn't like it. He's always not the biggest fan, but sometimes he's okay with it. It depends on the day. But the one thing I will say about that, Pete, not to go off down memory lane, but there are, you come across people in this business who are, I would consider, work friends, work acquaintances, and sometimes those relationships through no one's fault, sort of diminish if people go different ways. If they go to work for someone else, if they, retire, as Lou did, whatever it might be. But my relationship with Lou has maintained, and even at his age, in his days, we were sitting at dinner, and people had gotten up to go and get their food, and I thought, I eat all the time, sometimes too much. I thought, I'm not going to get dinner. Lou's assistant was going to pick his up. He's 88 and he's had some back issues. He had a little trouble, navigating crowds, so someone's going to go pick up his plate for him, and I'm sitting there and I said, let's talk a few minutes, coach. You're about to be inundated. And the first thing he said was the thing that he always said to me throughout the entire time that I've known him. He said, "What can I do for you?" And I sort of thought that encapsulates the magic of a great coach and a great person, really. And it probably sort of captures the feeling, not that Marcus Freeman goes around asking all of his players, "What can I do for you?" But I think there's a feeling on this Notre Dame team, and maybe the Ohio State team too, post Michigan, of what can I do for this? What can I do for this cause? And, it's served both of them very well.
Notre Dame is a program that loves its own lore. Right. Like I think maybe more than any other program. There's a few that are in the conversation, but my
alma mater's in the conversation.
They're in the conversation. They're in the
but
conversation.
Maybe not like that. Maybe not like that.
Yeah. And they love to lean into the moment, and you can feel sort of a new aura of lore around Marcus Freeman being built. You can feel it around Riley Leonard being built. You can feel the moment coming. Look, they would have to play somewhat close to a perfect game to win. And they would need Will Howard to make some of the mistakes that he's made and he's shown he's capable of making. A few things would have to fall their way. 1-22, Notre Dame simply isn't as talented. But they have some unbelievable talents. They've shown together consistently since Northern Illinois the ability to play together and be synchronized and play hard and play for a greater cause. And in college football, you can forget the portal, you can forget NIL pay. That still matters. I'm a firm believer that still matters. So you can get a funky special teams moment. You can get a great individual play from an unexpected source. You have a bunch of young defensive backs playing at their tails off, right? Like really, really, I think underappreciated how well they've come along since Ben Morrison got hurt, and they've surrounded Xavier Watts really just with some intriguing, dynamic young players. So I am curious to see when the moment comes how Notre Dame can close the gap.
Where I think it is. I think the game is won, or two places. Game would be won or lost if Notre Dame's front can do what the last two teams in the playoff really any of them haven't been able to do fully, and that's take advantage of Ohio State's offensive line. Maybe it's not a weakness anymore, but the fact that it's been rebuilt, you keep waiting for someone to fully take advantage of it. If they can, I think that's one thing. And if they can they get Ohio State in third down? And for all of the prowess, now you can argue they didn't really even need any third downs against Oregon, and that is a fair assessment of the situation. But I think they were 3 of 10 against Texas, only 4 of 11 against Oregon, and for the year they're kind of middle of the pack, which is probably a little bit surprising given their weapons. I think they rank in the 50s in terms of third down conversions over the course of the season. So Can you get them to third down? And they've struggled in third and long. So is Notre Dame, by the way, on
Sure.
offense. But can you get them in third down? Can you keep them from converting? Can you then get the ball and keep it the way Michigan did? That's the formula to me, Pete, for Notre Dame to keep this close and to have a chance to win is the Michigan formula. Just keep pounding it. Now, you can't keep pounding it if you get 0 on first down and 1 on second down. Then you've got to try to get the first down. But if you can get 3, and then you somehow even short pass anything, nudge out 4, and then do it again and frustrate them a little bit. That's the path to me for Notre Dame, to absent big special teams plays, absent catastrophic turnovers, things of that nature. That's the path for Notre Dame to have a chance to win the game.
And I think matchup wise, Rece, the thing I'll be most curious about is the great equalizer for Notre Dame is the eternal great equalizer in college football and really the NFL in the last decade, and that's the running quarterback. And what can Notre Dame do, especially because they have a gifted linebacker pairing in Sonny Styles and Cody Simon? Can they figure out a way to take away that advantage for Notre Dame? Now, when you run the quarterback, obviously it's a math advantage, right? Coaching 101 will tell you that. Can Sonny Styles be some kind of a spy? Obviously, there's Caleb Downs who could be a factor in that too. But can they find a way to mitigate that? Because as this Notre Dame season has gone on, there's less risk in running your quarterback when you have a finite number of games left, right? And we saw it against Georgia. We saw it, I think he had 9 called runs against Georgia. There was an uptick against Penn State. Especially with Jeremiah Love, very good. Like, he was obviously excellent. He obviously had that iconic touchdown run when he took 4 hits, but he was not like throw the ball to the flat and let him show 4.3 speed healthy. He was just 85% really darn good college tailback healthy. And so as injuries have come up, I think Notre Dame's offensive line is going to be a huge factor in this game. Obviously, Antoine Knapp is not going to play. Marcus Freeman has announced. They don't know about guard Rocco Spindler. And all of a sudden, when we talk about war of attrition, I think that's where we feel it.
If this game goes as expected, Ohio State wins the game, more than a touchdown favorite, as you mentioned. Saban said it on TV the other night too. Nobody's going to care. He referenced the 2017 Alabama lost to Auburn, their only loss of the season. Now it was a little bit different because that was a good Auburn team. It wasn't an average to mediocre team like Michigan was, but rivalry game, they lost, and then they still won the national championship. Ohio State still wins the national championship. What impact does it have about, in your judgment, the fans feeling toward Ryan Day, Ryan Day's feeling toward, wanting to be the eternal coach of the Buckeyes as opposed to, I don't know, maybe looking at something else, NFL, something of that nature, not this year, at some point later on. How do you think it affects the entire dynamic of Ryan Day and the Buckeyes?
Fascinating question, Rece. Winning championships changes everything. It just changes everything. And I don't think that Michigan loss is going to loom over a championship. I think the only people who think that are the people in maize and blue clinging to that as they watch their rival, march toward a championship, much like they did last season, right? I remember, seeing Jim Boeheim at USA Basketball after he won the national championship in 2003. And he was just like winning it. He said he totally underestimated how different you are treated once you win, right? Because he was the college basketball coach for a good decade, right? From 87 to 03, decade plus, that couldn't win the big one, right? And I really think that, we've seen it with these high profile coaches who get high leverage at bats and then, don't succeed in some of those at bats. Like, I think about Ryan Day. I think about that Clemson game, I believe in his first season when they had 7 things go wrong, a targeting call, reversed pick six going the other way. I think it was J.K. Dobbins has a ball,
Yeah.
bounce off his fingers at the goal line. Obviously, that Georgia game, there's been some bad luck. Harrison gets a concussion. They have literally at midnight, they have a kick in the air, right? To potentially win that game. Like, he's come sort of achingly close, and I think a championship would be a pretty good solve for his issues. Now, will there be pressure next November? When
Sure.
Ohio State plays
Yeah.
Michigan? Yeah, absolutely there will be, and that will hang over. But I really do think a championship is a paradigm changer. And I really do think the noise about Ryan Day's job status in late November was just noise. I mean, he's been a consistent top 5 coach by every conceivable metric. I think I made the analogy on the pod last week. It reminds me a little bit of the outcry for Tony Bennett when Virginia lost to UMBC back, I guess that would have been 7 or 8 years ago. And it was just like, you can win at this inordinately high level, but not in this one crucial spot is where the analogy pairs up. Now, Tony took a year and then went on one of the great NCAA tournament runs of all time. Ryan right now took 3-4 weeks, got his team back together, and they are certainly on what feels like a championship march, which still needs 60 minutes to be completed. And I'm not saying it's fait accompli that they win. They have a very difficult task, but they're heavy favorites to complete that. So where do you sit on that, Rece?
I think I agree with you 100%. It changes everything. It doesn't alleviate the desire to beat Michigan.
Sure.
But anyone calling for any type of change will just be viewed as spouting nonsense, which is what it is. And so I think it really will underscore the new era, because in the previous era and the immediate reaction, I think, is still a little bit of a transition to fans and all of us who've covered the sport adjusting to this more NFL style, where the end has always mattered more than anything else. But one of the things that's made college football regular season the best regular season in sport, and also sometimes the most unreasonable one, is that a game like that would have knocked Ohio State out of the playoff. The team that is proving up to this point, still with a game against Notre Dame to play, but proving up to this point to be the best team. But they would not have been in the playoff. And that's what we were accustomed to for the entirety of the history of the sport. Now it's different. And it was a little different with 4. It's a lot different with 12. So I don't think it diminishes the rivalry, but I do think it probably changes the be-all, end-all nature. Later on, the College Game Day podcast, Pete is going to have a great conversation with a man who faced both of these teams, Indiana head coach Curt Cignetti, and we'll also break down the national championship game further when we continue on the College Game Day podcast. Welcome back to the College Game Day podcast. Rece Davis and Pete Thamel. Pete's going to have a conversation with Curt Cignetti a little bit later on in the show. Of course, Cignetti played both of these teams, lost in Columbus, lost in South Bend. But of course, now Indiana, we're not going to talk Indiana here, but I was just thinking, as you get ready to do the final rankings for whatever that's worth, your 2 losses are to the 2 teams that played in the national championship game. That's going to get you a really good finish. So Cignetti will give some insight into what it's like to face both of these teams. Notre Dame and Ohio State, for whatever reason, multitude of historical reasons why they haven't faced off more often. Notre Dame had other regional games that it deemed more important at the time. It was important to them after they were snubbed by the Big Ten, almost 100 years ago, to become a national brand. So they were going to play USC. They had the rivalry with Michigan State. They played Michigan a little bit more often, it seemed, over the years, than they did Ohio State. But as it stands, the Fighting Irish haven't beaten the Buckeyes since 1936. Now, that's only a string of 6 in a row in the last 2. The first game, Pete, and I'll recount, I imagine you might assume, Monday night before the championship game. The first game between Notre Dame and Ohio State was billed as a game of the century. It was a November game in Columbus. Famously, when the Irish arrived to play, I believe it was the mayor of Columbus who gave them a key to the city and said, "This will get you in, but it won't get you out." You know, so there was, you know, there
in
was
36. Did they have a game of the century every year too? Did it start then?
it probably did. It probably started along with some of those Notre Dame Army games too. But in 1935, Notre Dame heavily favored. Ohio State got a 2-touchdown lead, went up 13-0. And Notre Dame rallied.
Back then, that's a pretty good lead.
Big lead. They rallied late. Do you know who threw the winning touchdown pass for Notre Dame? He's a college football Hall of Famer, and also coincidentally might have had an impact on some of your deep dive classic English literature classes at Syracuse.
Oh,
A halfback by any other name throws the same. William Shakespeare, the Bard. Bill Shakespeare. Bill Shakespeare was, you know, back in the day, you ran it differently. I think he was a halfback by trade, but he threw, and it wasn't like a trick play. It was I should know this. I assume they were still running the old Notre Dame box in 35, I think. But at any rate, he threw the winning touchdown pass. They won 18-13. The next year, they won 7-2, and since then, it's been all Buckeyes all the time.
You want a good Notre Dame Heisman or throwback fun fact?
Yes, I do.
Angelo Bertelli went to my high school.
Did he really?
Springfield Cathedral, the late Springfield Cathedral. It's now called Pope Francis. But yeah, Angelo Bertelli, his picture was up in our halls, and he's he's one of the iconics. Won the Heisman in 1943.
You know who looks great and is Marcus Freeman. Just turned 39 years old the day after they beat Penn State. Ohio State guy, terrific linebacker for them, close to Jim Tressel. And, you know, it's really funny sometimes about how people can move from there. And this has not happened yet for Marcus totally. I think now, look, at Lou's deal the other night, there were some heavy Notre Dame hitters there, and they all love them some Marcus Freeman. I mean, he is, in their mind, he is theirs. And I think that Marcus feels the same way about Notre Dame. I mean, I think he loves the place. He talks a lot about how special it is. You know, if he wins a championship there, it's really funny. You look at guys who sort of become the place they coach as opposed to the place they played. And I think that's the opportunity here for Freeman. He's probably already that and is going to be that as time goes on, because before Notre Dame people get upset, I understand we're talking he's 3-4 years in here. I get it, but there's a feeling surrounding this. You win a championship, it's different. It's like, sort of like Dabo at Clemson. Dabo played at Alabama, but he is Clemson. That's what he becomes. Guys that move along and go to different places. Bo Schembechler, I know not playing there necessarily, but he was viewed as a Woody Hayes guy, coming up until he became his own guy at Woody Hayes' arch rival. So, those things, those things kind of matter. I know you're going to talk to Cignetti coming up here in just a few minutes. So what do you think? You ready to make a prediction? Our final podcast before the game.
Ready to make a prediction, Rece. I'm ready to make a prediction. Absent the Springfield rifle, I think Notre Dame's going to struggle to move the ball. I don't feel like their skill has played well in the playoff, and I think gotten better as the year's gone on. They're very good at tight end. I just really struggle seeing where they're going to find yards. I think Mike Denbrock has called an unbelievable playoff, by the way. I want to give him a lot of credit for that. I think the sum has been greater than the parts in that Notre Dame offense, and that's the ultimate compliment to a coordinator. Their halftime adjustments coming out of Penn State and figuring out ways to run the ball really changed that entire game. Steve Angeli changed the game in the final minutes, getting them on that drive to the field goal and getting them some momentum. But they said, hey, we need to change how we're doing things. And they did. They did some different things in the run scheme. It got them going. It got them momentum. I'm doing a Rece Davis where I'm saying two nice things before I say my reality. I think this is like a 30-13 type game, and Ohio State wins.
I'm afraid of that as well. I mean, I'm going to be just totally candid about it. With the weapons they have and the quickness with which they can strike. Look, I have a lot of issue, as I pointed out on the post-game pod, a lot of issue with what Texas did on defense with 29 seconds remaining in the first half. That said, they caught him in pressure. They hit him. That said, the screen pass went for 75. And you don't necessarily always have to be caught in a questionable decision schematically against Ohio State for them to go 75 on you. We've seen Jeremiah Smith do it in all season, and in the Rose Bowl, we've seen Emeka Egbuka do it. A lot of potential for that, even against a very gritty Notre Dame defense. So I think it goes one of two ways, Pete. It either goes 30-13-ish, or Al Golden comes up with enough third down stops. He fools Will Howard enough into giving them the ball a couple of times. Notre Dame runs it enough to keep it close. And then it comes down to a kick. And one way or the other, low scoring game, somebody gets into the low 20s and wins the game. Otherwise, but I think it's going to be Ohio State. I just as much respect and admiration as I have for what Notre Dame has done and what they are as a team, there are just so many weapons on the other side. And there are so many guys. I don't know if Notre Dame has the outside receivers to really test the corners who have, who are good players, but at times have been taken advantage of at different times this season. The safeties are phenomenal. As you mentioned earlier, the linebackers are phenomenal. And I think that, Sawyer having the big signature moment, Tuimoloau, I know he's gotten a little nicked here and there. He's had a great playoff run. Their interior guys have been sensational.
Really good.
Most notably Tyleik Williams, Ty Hamilton, both been sensational. I think it's too much. I think it will probably go along the lines that you say, and I'm going to call for Ohio State to win the national championship. I'm going to say 31-16.
Okay.
The caveat I will offer is that if it's close in the fourth quarter, meaning if it's a one possession game in the fourth quarter, I think Notre Dame will win.
All right.
But I don't
That's
think
fair.
Okay.
I hope it's a one possession game in the fourth quarter, just for like America.
Yeah.
I don't hope Notre Dame wins. I don't care who wins, but like,
Right.
I would love to see that. I would, we were really lucky to have two semifinals like we did, right? Like those were taut, tense, just fun football games to be around.
People complained about the early blowouts, but we went for a long time in the 14 playoff era in which the two semifinals, or the only two games before the championship game, were blowouts for the most part. I think we forgot because the last 2 years we've had great ones, especially last year we had great ones, and we had that again this year. And so now we see if we can get a championship game to match, to match the semifinals. You're always going to have some of that. I mean, the NFL games, this year, and people say, look at that as your paradigm of hope. All of the NFL games that have gotten away. Well, almost half the league is in the playoff. That is one of the dangers of expanding the playoff field, both in the NFL and in college football. And there's much less disparity in a good team and a bad team in the NFL than there is in college football. Much less. Did you see? I don't know if you saw this. My son showed me this the other day, and this is a quick aside to illustrate the disparity point. If every one possession game, and I don't know who in the world figures out how to do this, but if every one possession game in the NFL had flipped, gone the other way, and I realize that's unreasonable, all of them wouldn't go the other way. But if they had, Kansas City would be one of the worst teams in football.
Wow.
And our Jaguars would have been a 4 seed in the playoff. How about that? And
that is really searching for sunshine.
Like no, it wasn't even Jaguars based. It was just like those were the two biggest or two of the biggest.
Who do you want your coach to be, Rece, of your Jags? Duval.
I don't want to say for fear of angering some of our loyal college football fan bases.
Oh.
I know they think they want defense. I need somebody to unlock the wonders of Trevor Lawrence's talent. So you leave it at that.
Would you want the guy who would transition to the NFL and be the free agent king?
Wouldn't hate it. Wouldn't hate it. So anyway, I digress. Pete's going to have a conversation with Indiana's Curt Cignetti, the head coach who had a wonderful season for the Hoosiers and faced both of the teams who will play for the national championship. That's coming up on the College Game Day podcast.
Welcome back to the College Game Day pod. We're here with Indiana coach Curt Cignetti, fresh off a trip to Charlotte for the AFCA Coaches Convention. Curt, when you've had a season like you've had, a historic one at Indiana, a whirlwind for you coming from James Madison with such big changes, have you had a little time to reflect?
Just a little. Nowadays, you come out of the season, you're deep into the portal putting next year's roster together, amongst other things. So a little bit, but retooling for next year, really.
Obviously, there was a lot more attention paid to your portal pickups this year, and I feel like a lot of programs have tried to emulate your approach. Walk us through the difference building Indiana for 2025 through the portal than from 2024.
Well, last year was such a whirlwind. It was a quick hiring process. Get here, we got all these guys in the transfer portal and really had a lot of needs. And then, the JMU thing kind of started and picked up, which I never really, in my mind, had thought that was a possibility during the hiring process, which was so quick because I really didn't have a time to think about a whole lot. But as soon as we got here, I had about half the staff here. A few of them went in the portal, and it was a close, tight-knit group and led to about 13 of them coming. Well, we don't have that this year. So, but that's fine. A lot of good players out there, a lot of guys that fit our program. I think we've done good. We've got 17. We expect the 18th to come in today. And, we've filled the needs that we've needed to fill. And I would say the biggest difference is probably you don't know quite as much about these guys this year as we did last year because, a lot of those guys we had coached for 3 or 4 years. And some of the other ones we brought in, we had contacts from our staff that had been on in their program in the past and could vouch. But these guys, we're excited about all of them, and this is a new reality in college football, and there'll be a lot of new faces out there in the spring, both from high school and the portal.
I'm going to ask you about Fernando Mendoza, who's seemingly your quarterback of the future, but I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you about Kurtis Rourke. As he entered the draft process, it was revealed that he had played the season on a torn ACL, which is a little bit mind-bending. I have not heard you talk about that. You probably have at some point or juncture. Just walk me through a little bit about, was that new to you? And just what does that say about Kurtis in the season?
Yeah, I can't really speak to that, to be honest with you. He tweaked his knee a little bit in July doing a change of direction drill. And we MRI'd it, and it was all good. He did wear the brace in fall camp and during the season. He did tweak his knee at the end of the Purdue game a little bit, but not a whole lot was made of it. And then when they went in after the Notre Dame game, they found a few things that were not present during the season. So, but I give him a lot of credit. He had a great year, obviously. The knee was a concern throughout the season, and I'm glad he got it fixed, and he'll be good to go for the NFL.
Obviously, you have familiarity with the Mendoza family, as his younger brother was quarterback for you last season. Walk us through the courtship of Fernando and the twists and turns, and how happy you are that he's landed in Bloomington.
Well, we had Alberto, the younger one, and so we had a relationship with the family. And, Fernando was highly sought after. 2 years of eligibility, started for a year and a half. And he's got a lot of talent, a lot of skill. He was under duress, quite frankly, a lot last year at Cal. The protection wasn't very good. They had 41 sacks. He didn't have a lot of time to throw. So you get to see him extend plays quite a bit on tape. And there's talent there. So, we're excited about him. fit them into our system, tweak our system according to the quarterback and who else we have offensively. And, all these guys have the last five of them, four of them been player of the year. Kurtis is the only one that hadn't. He had a #1 quarterback rating in the country last year. They all kind of follow the same path. They struggle the first 2 weeks of spring ball, and then they're better the last two. Good summer, good fall camp, and put it on the field, have some success, and build off it. So we're excited about them. We think we can do a lot of things with them.
What's his skill set, and how do you think it meshes with your system?
Well, our system's flexible. I mean, we've had true dual threat guys play that position, and we change. We've had true pocket guys. He can throw the ball. He can spin the ball. He can make all the throws. He's pretty mobile. He throws well on the move, and he can run. He runs better than Kurtis, and he's a highly intelligent guy. So that's where it all begins, as everybody knows, and we think he's going to give us something.
Well, you are in the unique position where the only two losses on your ledger are the two teams who are going to be playing Monday night in the national title game. Just walk me through the matchup. You obviously spent a lot of hours breaking down those teams, both going into their games and coming out, and how you played against them. How do you see this playing out, Curt?
Two great teams.
Yeah.
I mean, you got the #1 and #2 ranked defenses in the country. And now, surprisingly, Notre Dame scores more points a game than Ohio State does, but only by 1.5 points. But what Notre Dame does, they lead the country in defensive touchdowns. They lead the country in block kicks. They're one of the leaders in the country in turnover ratio. So they create points on defense and special teams. Now, Ohio State, great against the run, 51 sacks, and obviously explosive on offense. So it's going to be a great game. And, I think when you look at it, you say, okay, can Notre Dame create points outside their offense? #1. And then #2, Notre Dame's playing great defense right now. Boy, they're fast. They fly the ball. I mean, Marcus Freeman's done a great job of developing and coaching that team. And, but so has Ryan Day with his team. Notre Dame likes to play man coverage. I mean, that's what they do. They play some zone, but they like to play man coverage. And I think that right there is the kind of the key matchup is, how much do they change in the back end? And then who wins those one-on-one battles? Because obviously, Ohio State's got a lot of weapons. And so I think it's going to be a great game.
Looking back today a little bit at your Ohio State game with them, the biggest play in that game was, well, the two biggest were really on special teams. Like that, those were not sort of wheelhouse Ohio State things that had happened. One was obviously just a mistake, and the other was the explosive play by one of the country's best players. So when you look back at that game, do you feel like outside of those two moments, you played them pretty well and did a pretty good job neutralizing them?
Well, we didn't protect the passer very well with some communication and some missed assignments. And I think the noise got to us a little bit. I thought we ran the ball fairly well. I thought we played solid defense. We gave up 14 points, like you said, on the punt team. And the Notre Dame game was different. I think they just shut us down completely. Now, I think defensively, outside the 98-yard run, we played okay. And we played okay against Ohio State, too, outside of the last drive when they recovered the onside kick and really wanted to just sort of end the game. And, we gave up the 40-yard run down to the 1-yard line.
Yeah.
So, but they're two really good football teams. I mean, you got 1 versus 2 defensively in the country. And, offensively, Ohio State's got a lot of weapons. And, that receiver, I mean, Jeremiah Smith. But, Notre Dame's playing really good in the back end right now. They got some really good players back there. I mean, Clark at Rover or whatever they call him, the nickel, and then boundary corner, field corners playing well, put great heat on the quarterback, as does Ohio State. And then, Riley Leonard, that guy's a great competitor, man. I mean, I saw him do it at Duke. I saw him do it at Notre Dame. I mean, that guy's going to compete and compete. So, I think if it's close, Notre Dame's got a lot of intangibles. Is Ohio State capable of pulling away somewhat? Perhaps, but that's why you play the game.
Instead of asking you to make a pick, which I know coaches don't tend to like to do, and you sort of showed your hand there, I'm going to ask you one football nerd XO question and allow you to dive in the weeds a little bit, and then we'll get you out of here, Curt. So you mentioned the Notre Dame's man coverage as their baseline defense, their preference defense, and the challenges that'll present. Walk me through a little bit of the mind of an offensive coach when you see man, and then what it does to a defense if you force them out of it. Just walk through a little bit of the depth of X's and O's there.
Well, a lot of it's press man, especially in the bench. A little bit more press in the bench than the field. So everybody's going to run the go ball or back shoulder fade because you gotta be able to win that matchup right there. And then you got to be able to separate down the field and protect the quarterback long enough that he can make the throws. And Ohio State obviously has great, they've got great receivers. That Jeremiah Smith is an unbelievable player. So, now are they going to cheat the safety over the top, lean him toward his side, which we used to get a lot to Julio Jones at Alabama, that kind of stuff. But there's a lot of ways to beat man coverage, the picks, the rubs, but and then how long will the quarterback have to throw the football? Because Notre Dame can come after the passer. They are fast on defense. And they are flying around right now. They're playing at a high level.
Very good. Thank you to Curt Cignetti for joining the College Game Day podcast. Thanks for listening. Please download the podcast wherever you prefer. And if you don't know where to get it, you can just Google it.